Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 20th of December. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information to keep you and your family and community better informed so you can make better decisions, get out of the way of bad weather, or just enjoy the good weather, no matter what part of Alaska you're watching from tonight. We thank you and welcome you. As always, we encourage you to check out the phone number. 1-800-472-0391 is the Alaska Weather Information Line, 24-hour 7-day-a-week coverage there of your forecast for Alaska. Simply call that number, write down the number prompt that you receive there as you're listening, and so you can type in your code and listen to the forecast for your part of Alaska all over the phone. It is a free service for you. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. If you haven't tried the mobile app, try it out this week. Mobile.weather.gov, mobile.weather.gov. And once you load that up, you'll see a line where you can type in your village or your community at the top, say Chiniga. And once you get that, you just bookmark that page on your home screen there on your device, your cell phone. And it is a mobile-friendly option to get the weather forecast from the National Weather Service. It acts like an app, but it is a web page, which means it comes from the National Weather Service here in Alaska. So try that out. If you can't find what you're looking for, you can't make that app thing work that I just told you about, you don't like what you hear on the Alaska Weather Information Line, send me an email, david.snyder@noaa.gov. I'm happy to serve you any way I can, and I wish you all the very best on this Thursday. Here's a look at what's going on with the satellite picture across the rest of the last frontier, the 49th state. Low pressure once again in the Gulf of Alaska. Not a surprise, it is the time of the year for that. A strong southeasterly flow blowing in a lot of moisture from the Pacific. Out ahead of that, some drying taking place across central and southern parts of southeast. Actually saw what looked like some sunshine hitting the ground there across southern parts of the Panhandle today. We are still looking at a little bit of snow across the northern Panhandle, all the way into the northern Gulf there, in places like Yakutat, looking at a little bit of snow from yesterday. For South Central, some dreary skies today, but not a whole lot of precipitation. A little bit of freezing drizzle on the roads. You may have seen that if you were driving around earlier. A look further northward shows plenty of cloud cover across the interior, the north slope all the way down the west coast. And you can see kind of a spiral into low pressure here across the central and western chain. Yet another area of low pressure building out there just west of St. Paul, a clearly defined frontal boundary here, another one here, and another one right about here. And all of that, again, is bringing a little bit of a sharper change as those waves pass by. One of those set to move into Nikolsky and Unalaska later on tonight. Another one just south of you, and yet another one building way out to the west. Each one of those bringing up the winds from the east and southeast before they pass and changing the winds around after they pass to more of a north and westerly direction, because those are the rules of physics here in the northern hemisphere. Now, as we look across the central and northern parts of the interior, a lot of cloud cover, but a lot of cold. We're also looking at during the day, at least some clearing here. It's not actually showing up on the satellite picture because the satellite is looking down and saying, oh, that's cold stuff, so I'm going to paint in cloud cover here, because that's how that works with the infrared satellite picture here. But what we do know is there really is a great deal of cold moving in off of eastern Asia through the Bering Strait, through St. Lawrence Island, down through St. Matthew. And because of that, it is moving or advecting sea ice down through the Bering Strait, kind of getting jumbled up here a little bit, but it has covered up and frozen up enough of Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait to be generally sea ice covered at this point. South of that, we're also seeing that offshore wind blow into areas of low pressure here across the sea. And what that's doing is taking the ice that has formed along the coast and moving that away and making room for new ice to form along the coast in its wake. And that is how we're expanding the ice in the Bering Strait at the end of the month here. So interesting things are happening, but what we're noticing more than anything else is that sea ice is indeed growing, and kind of at a rapid clip right now for most of the North and the eastern Bering Sea for sure. And then around Cook Inlet, we'll also take a look at the sea ice here in just a little bit, but certainly seen some ice growth there as well. Here's your surface chart for the afternoon. A 976 millibar low sitting in the central and western Gulf. Again, bringing up that deep east and southeasterly flow into the heart of the Gulf. To the east of that, a brief ridge of high pressure trying to slow the winds and calm the seas just a little bit. We have a weak area of low pressure, a dead front more or less right across southeast. A little bit of snow still forming on the north side of that over some of the higher terrain. And it has allowed for some air to move over the Kenai Peninsula and the southern parts of Cook Inlet. Some of that is still cold and cloudy, but there have been a few breaks from time to time. Across the Brooks Range, especially the south-facing slopes, we have seen some areas of light snow today. South of that, though, it's pretty dry. A lot of that air is moving off of the continent out into the ocean and then wrapping into areas of low pressure even further to the west. What that's doing, again, is keeping things pretty cold, keeping things pretty dry, but also making room for more ice to grow. And a lot of that is being brought to us by that big blue H across eastern Russia there at 1,022 millibars, pushing in colder air from the Arctic Ocean and through the Bering Strait. Across the Beaufort Seacoast and the Chukchi Sea, we've had a lot of low clouds and areas of flurries there showing up on the observations. The crossed arrows mean areas of blowing snow, and while it doesn't mean snow is actually falling, it means it is moving around and could be reducing visibility where you are. As we head into tonight, low pressure will fill in just a little bit. The level comes up to about 980 millibars, which means it's not quite as intense as it was about 12 hours ago. High pressure moves to the east over British Columbia and the southern parts of the Yukon. And we're still looking at some spotty areas of snow showers, generally across northern parts of the Panhandle, but you'll notice a wave kind of creeping in across the outer waters there and toward the outer coast. Around Prince William Sound, down the Kenai Fjord side of the Seward Peninsula, through Cook Inlet, Chillicothe Strait, and all the way down the Alaska Peninsula, precipitation and north and easterly winds are expected there. Across the west and just west of the Pribilofs here, you see that low pressure system really hasn't moved much, and so we've changed that front to more of a stationary boundary. And along that line, this will probably start to fall apart there, but it is going to be the focus for precipitation and wind, generally to the west of the Pribilofs. So as we go through tonight, up north, high pressure is trying to stabilize things. It's going to lock in low clouds and areas of flurries. And because of that high pressure system around the Fairbanks and North Pole area, air quality alerts have been issued there. So make sure you check on your local restrictions before you light that wood fire. It is that time of the year for some deep inversions there around the Middle Tanana Valley. Out across the west, that front for the western chain has not moved very much. A 984 millibar low on the tail end of that with an accompanying 979 millibar low. That creeps eastward just a little bit more as we head into your Friday. And the system across the Gulf lifts northward. You'll notice that there are thunderstorm symbols there. That tells us that shower and thunderstorm activity may be possible here, and that convective type weather across the eastern Gulf could bring some brief rounds of maybe some heavier rainfall underneath those areas there, but certainly some possibilities of lightning as well, as we saw yesterday. Late last night and early in the morning hours, there is certainly some convective weather across the eastern Gulf. It'll happen in pretty much the same old spot once again. Across northern parts of southeast, and especially in the northern Gulf, rain may mix with snow as we head into Friday. Showers of snow across the Chugach and the Alaska Range, all the way down the Aleutian Arm and the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian Mountain Range there into the peninsula. Looks like a better chance for rainfall with some higher terrain snow around Kodiak. And the Kenai Fjords region, again, picking up a better chance of snow, but most areas along Cook Inlet look to be generally dry as this air will be coming over the mountains and drying up those lower levels. So we'll probably see clouds around the Anchorage and Matsu areas. We'll probably see maybe some spits of snow or even drizzle if it's that warm, but probably won't see a whole lot actually reaching the ground. So maybe that's good news where you are. I'm not terribly sure, but as long as it's not rain, right? 980 millibar low there creeping westward into the central and western chain, and snow showers on the north side of that. Not a whole lot across the interior. In fact, clouds are going to break up south of Norton Sound all the way into Lake Iliamna and just westward. Up across the upper Yukon Valley and the south-facing slopes of the eastern Brooks Range. Don't be surprised to run into some snow showers there. As we get into Saturday, you can see a little bit more of a zone of snow shower activity extending to the north and northeast of this parent low pressure system at 990 millibars now for Saturday. Another low's hot on its trail coming in from the east and southeast. And once again, if you're heading down toward the Pacific Northwest for any flights out of town for the holiday season or just general travel there, keep in mind weather conditions will be changing pretty frequently as the main storm track is generally south of Alaska. When we get to the jet stream here, you'll see what I mean, and we'll point that out again. But the main weather track is just south of Alaska and pushing a lot of these stronger storms right into the west coast. from Seattle all the way down through Portland and into California. So you might have some weather travel issues there if you're heading into the West Coast. A little bit further west, you can see periods of rain and snow showers across the central and western chain. That low down to 986 millibars. But if you look carefully, you see this dip in the isobars here, the lines of constant pressure, they're pushing downward. And the only reason that's happening is because there is a cold, big, high-pressure system here across eastern Asia that is trying to scoop all the cold out of Alaska and move that to the west. So that is feeding the storm, should make that a little bit bigger, but it's also going to keep most of Alaska fairly dry for right now, and it is going to continue growing that ice along the west coast, pushing that westward, and allowing new ice to form along the coast as that ice advects or moves to the west. So a lot of changes there thanks to that big high. Snow showers again off to the north and to the east of this low pressure system. So some of those will form along the Alaska Range and into the upper Yukon Valley, but places like Fairbanks will be kind of right there on the edge of seeing snow showers nearby, but maybe not right overhead. So a lot of changes as we go into the weekend there, but certainly a lot of cold weather across the western interior. Look at this. As we get into McGrath, it looks like overnight lows could be as cold as 30 below tonight. Galena not too far behind at 28 below. Anvik all the way down toward Grayling, the Yukon, Hooper Bay. You're looking at temps anywhere from 15 to about 25 below. It's going to be cold stuff for you tomorrow morning. 15 below around Kotzebue, 9 below for Utqiagvik, 5 below for areas around Arctic Village, 14 below in Northway, 17 below in Fairbanks. South of the Alaska Range, not as bad. Single-digit temperatures above zero, 24 in Kodiak, mid-20s and lower 30s for Southeast. The Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula in the 20s and 30s, St. Paul 25. High temperatures for Friday, warming up a little bit, but you're still looking at daytime highs, only making it to about 10 to 20 below zero around Galena. Some of the coldest weather there, anywhere from 5 to 10 below for the North Slope. South Central, teens and 20s, near 40 in Kodiak actually, 30s and 40s for Southeast. Overnight lows Saturday morning, still pretty cold stuff, anywhere from 20 to 30 below again for the Koyukuk Valley, including Galena and Ruby, all the way out toward the YK Delta, anywhere from 10 to 20 below. Nome looking at 9 below, and Utqiagvik 17 below.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to aviation weather now, with the Gulf of Alaska just covered up with low pressure here. We're going to see widespread MVFR out over the open water and passing waves of MVFR across parts of southeast. Look for a morning start around Gustavus, Capital City, up toward Haines and Skagway to look for MVFR in the morning. Again, around Kodiak Island and westward toward the Alaska Peninsula, a little thicker stream of moisture is coming in from the east and southeast, so expect that to start out your day there. Also around the Pribilofs up north, generally north and west of Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass, we're going to see a little bit better chance for IFR there, and also across the western chain. You can see that slowly approaching from the west as we get into Friday afternoon, and we're going to see a band of convection set up again around the vicinity of that low pressure system in the front that's moving closer to southeast. Some improvements in the inside passage, areas around Yakutat looking at IFR by the afternoon. MVFR covering up most of the Kenai Peninsula, but seems to be limited just south of Turnagain Arm. And out across Bristol Bay, expect widespread MVFR there, and IFR expected over the Pribilofs and parts of the North Slope again, with MVFR mainly for coastal locations of the North Slope. As we get into Saturday morning, that doesn't really change very much. It looks like IFR is pretty much hunkered into the same old spots there, including areas around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse. IFR will surround a broad area of low pressure here across the western chain, across the Alaska Peninsula, and then more IFR moving into the northern and western parts of the Gulf Coast, including Kodiak Island, parts of Prince William Sound and Homer, all the way down toward the Dixon entrance, but still limited as far east and north it goes inside of the inside passage for southeast, but we're still watching that band of convection there. That should start to dissipate a little bit more by Saturday afternoon. MVFR lingers across southern and central parts of southeast, with IFR focused on the north and the Gulf Coast, just outside of Prince William Sound for the most part, and very close to Homer. But the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet region, and a widespread area of the interior, the west coast, and northwest should see greatly improved conditions up to VFR by Saturday afternoon. IFR across some of the west coast and just west of Nunivak Island, but east of the Pribilofs, so that could make a big difference for you and your travel plans there. Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to lean over toward VFR as the day goes on, but look what happens around most of the Alaska Range. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see MVFR develop in the afternoon, but after that, everything's VFR. Rainy, windy pass, Isabel Pass, Mentasta Pass all look pretty good. Dehne Pass, we expect VFR throughout the day. Portage Pass, marginal conditions through most of the day, but really most of that's going to be on the Prince William Sound side. So if you can get through the pass, you'll probably find MVFR fairly quickly, but most of the pass is probably going to be pretty close to VFR. And Chilkoot and White Pass, IFR conditions there to start, with some improvements as the day goes on. Freezing levels, really no big change from what we saw yesterday. You can see the surface freezing lines a little bit further north now with those two western storms coming in. As far as the 2,000-foot line goes, it's still south, just right over the northern edge of Haida Gwaii, so no big change there. Just most of the state is sub-freezing to start. Icing potential has levels around 3 to about 4,000 feet across the Bering and out across the southwest and most of the Gulf there. We're listed this as isolated moderate with no significant concerns there. But with the convection firing up in the afternoon, obviously isolated severe concerns would be found out over the water. The jet stream has this super highway of weather coming in from eastern Asia, flying across the North Pacific and just slamming into the west coast. Something to keep in mind if you are traveling out of Alaska into Portland, Seattle, or anywhere down into California. Do expect some travel delays because of weather over the next, say, week or so. This is probably not going to change very much, and just about every day there's an impulse that's going to hit the west coast, and things could slow down because of that. So don't be surprised. Remember, you heard it right here on Alaska Weather. As you take a look at the 9,000-foot winds, you have low pressure across the Gulf, a southeasterly flow coming up southeast. There's a stronger area of low pressure across the western chain, and high pressure trying to set up across the Bering, not doing such a hot job. More of an easterly offshore flow for more of the north and western coast, about 15 to 25 knots there. 3,000 feet, you can see that offshore flow for more areas. One thing it's going to do is affect the ice edge. We're going to talk about that in a little bit with the marine weather coming up. In the meantime, low pressure across the Gulf has 40-knot winds coming into southeast, 35-knot winds blowing in from the east over Prince William Sound and the Kenai, and more of an offshore flow for Bristol Bay. Light winds over the interior, though, about 10 knots or so. So where are the trouble spots? Turbulence has a little bit of chop across the northwestern corner around the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. Point Hope up to about Point Lay, below 4,000 feet. Considerable moderate across the western chain. No surprise there with the storm just to the south. And then Kodiak Island to the Barren Islands, and really at least a little bit of bump up through the Cook Inlet region, generally below 4,000 feet. But I think the more persistent area is going to be out over southeast, and again, convection will be possible as well.
Phase-tastic, Part 2. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. You might remember that 2 weeks ago, James asked me a question about what phase the moon would be in if it rose at noon.
Yep, and you got it right, too.
Yes, I did. So, I have a question for you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, if the moon sets at noon, what phase is it in?
It would be at last quarter.
Excellent.
Thank you, thank you. Ooh, that reminds me of a moon joke.
Oh, I'd say save it for later, James.
Yay. Okay, so we'll show you how I answered that question, and we have a really cool conjunction of Jupiter and Mercury at the end of this week, and the moon joins the party right after New Year's. Well, let's show you. When we talked 2 weeks ago about the phases of the moon, we mentioned that it takes about a week for the moon to go from one major phase to the next. For example, if the moon is in the new phase on December 7th, it will be at first quarter on December 15th.
When the moon is at first quarter, it's traveled a quarter of the way around the Earth, and therefore it's 90 degrees east of the sun in the sky. So the moon rises just as the sun reaches its highest point in the sky at noon.
Then, a week after that, on December 22nd, the moon is in its full phase, and it's 180 degrees away from the sun. This means that the moon will rise as the sun sets, and it will set as the sun rises. In the days following the full moon, we begin to see less and less of the daytime side of the moon and more of the nighttime side. These are called the waning phases. Waning means to get smaller, and the moon is appearing humped again, so we call this the waning gibbous moon.
On December 29th, it will have been a week since the full moon, and the moon has traveled 3/4 of the way around the Earth, so we call this phase last quarter. We again see half of the daylit side and half of the nighttime side, but it's reversed from what we saw at first quarter. The The moon is also visible in the early morning instead of the early evening.
In this configuration, the moon is now 90 degrees west of the sun. So when the sun is at its highest point in the sky at noon, the moon will be setting on the western horizon.
Lastly, we have the waning crescent phase. This occurs during the last week of the moon's orbit around the Earth, and we see the daylit side shrink more and more as the days pass.
On January 5th, 29 days after the beginning of the moon's journey, the moon is back where it started, in a position putting it between the Earth and the sun. The moon is new once again. Oh, hey Dehne, can I tell my joke now?
Sure, I guess so. Go ahead.
Okay. How do you know when the moon has gone completely broke?
I don't know, James. How?
It's down to its last quarter.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty good. Totally worth the wait. Now, I know we've been talking about the moon a lot, but let's see what the planets are doing this week, too. Okay, we have our skies set up for December 21st, an hour before sunrise, facing southeast. Low on the horizon, you'll see 3 stars marking the face of Scorpius the Scorpion. And just below them, you'll see Antares, the Scorpion's heart. To the left of that, you'll see the planets Jupiter and Mercury.
The 2 planets will appear at their closest that day, and they'll be less than a full moon width apart.
Now, Mercury is a speedy planet, so this conjunction won't last long. If you miss seeing them that morning, make sure you check them out on December 22nd and December 23rd. They'll be a little farther apart, but still will make an impressive sight.
Then, a week later, the waning crescent moon joins the party, passing by Venus on January 1st and then Jupiter on January 3rd.
So, there you have it, the phases of the moon and a wonderful pairing of planets to end 2018.
It's all waiting for you when you
Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Moving on to your sea ice edge now. As we've been saying, the Chukchi Sea is pretty much frozen up all the way through the Bering Strait now and around St. Lawrence Island. If you were watching yesterday, you did not see anywhere close to this amount of ice around St. Lawrence Island. Certainly not this amount of white. All the way over to the Gulf of Anadyr and expanding out of Norton Sound away from the YK Delta and into Etolin Strait and closer to Nunivak Island now. The blue areas, of course, are marginal ice where concentrations are less than 80%, but even that is shrinking in as colder air is moving off the continent and through the Bering Strait, not only moving the ice southward, but also allowing new ice to form along the coast. And in its wake, more of that ice continues to move in place there. So pretty amazing stuff happening right before your eyes, especially this weekend last. Weather.gov/Anchorage/ice is the place to go to monitor the sea ice where you are. Here's a look at Friday's forecast for southeast now. Northerly winds across the Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3-foot seas expected there. We'll generally see smaller seas across the inside passage than what we were talking about a couple days ago. Notice that easterly flow picking up a little bit more though. For the Clarence Strait, 25 knots, 5-foot seas. And across the outer coast, a steadily 25 to 35 knot kind of wind coming up from the southeast, anywhere from 13 to about 16 feet outside of the Dixon entrance. As we get into Saturday, winds come down just a little bit south of Sitka, 25 to 30 knots there, generally 17-foot seas as you head up toward Cape Fairweather and Cape Suckling. Easterlies just outside of Prince William Sound, and northerlies all the way through Stevens Passage, but they take on a little bit of a northeasterly push and could gust up to 35 knots there with 4-foot seas expected on Saturday. Prince William Sound, northeasterlies 20 knots and 4-foot seas. A little bit of a stronger easterly flow across the northern Gulf as we get into Friday. Remember, a deep low pressure system is just to the south, so we're on the north side of the system. 13 to 14-foot seas across the northern Gulf, and in Cook Inlet, stiff winds out of the north and easterlies up to 20 to 30 knots. And seas sharply up, 5 foot in the north and 9 to 11 feet as you head down to the Barrens south of Clam Gulch. Now Saturday, northeasterly winds continue across Prince William Sound and in Cook Inlet, 20 to 35 knot winds in fact. For the western Barrens outside of Kashamak Bay, 11-foot seas expected there. In the northern Gulf, anywhere from 15 to 18 foot seas expected for Saturday. In Bristol Bay, northeasterlies 15 knots and 3 foot seas there. The northern Gulf, and that wind we see is reaching into Kodiak Island as well. 30-knot winds there from the north and the east. Seas as high as 16 to 17 feet, 10-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and northeasterlies down the Bering Sea coast with 7-foot seas there on Friday. About the same on Saturday, really. 20 to 25 knots coming out of Bristol Bay from the north and east. Northeasterlies still strong in Shelikof Strait, 35 knots and 13-foot seas there, 10 to 12-foot seas across the northern Gulf on winds that are 20 to about 35 knots. For the western chain, this is where we're going to see the strongest wind impacts probably most of the weekend. 45 to 50-knot winds, 15 to 18-foot seas expected. For your Friday, the central and eastern chain winds not as bad, 15 to 20 knots north of Nikolsky and Unalaska, and about 9 to 12-foot seas in the region. As we get into Saturday, you'll notice the winds come down pretty quickly out in the west, and that's what happens this time of the year. 14 to 16-foot seas, 25 to 35. Looking at winds across the central and eastern chain again, still not terribly bad, 10 to about 20 knots with 11 to 13-foot seas there on Saturday. For the west coast, the ice is forming, so we're losing some of those sea forecasts in Norton Sound. 10 knots out of the north, northeasterlies from St. Lawrence Island down to the Kuskokwim Delta, 15 knots and 5-foot seas there, 25 knots and 9-foot seas coming in from the east for St. Paul and St. George on Friday. A little bit of a northeasterly turn there on Saturday with a 7-foot sea, about the same for St. Matthew, a little bit faster winds there. And out of St. Lawrence Island, northerlies 20 knots and 5-foot seas, 15 knots over the ice in Norton Sound. For the Beaufort Sea, 10 to 15-knot winds there, it looks like, and also the Chukchi coast, 15 to 25 out of the north and northeast blowing into the Bering Strait. If there's a hint of some open water there, 5-foot seas will be the rule. Saturday, north and easterly winds coming down through the Chukchi Sea, 20 knots with 5-foot seas generally south of St. Lawrence Island, and again, heavy freezing spray will be an issue in that case. Northeasterlies for the Beaufort Sea over the ice again for your Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, there are no winter weather storms, no winter weather advisories, no high wind warnings. We're pretty much doing okay for tonight, and we'll take it. Look for a generally clear sky north of the Alaska Range. It will be cold, and in some of these places we're looking at overnight temperatures that are about 20 to 25, even about 30 below in some cases around the Koyukuk Valley. So stay warm out there. High pressure up across the Beaufort Sea. Areas of fog and flurries there, blowing snow as you get out toward the Bering Strait. Several waves of low pressure working their way in from west to east as we go through the remainder of the weekend. The next one's going to bring up the winds and some rain for parts of central and southern, southeast, and maybe some shower and storm activity closer to the coast. Snow showers over the mountains in south central. Another storm bringing up the wind in the western chain as we head into Friday and Saturday. And enjoy your weekend.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.